Greetings, Carbonauts. North Star here. I write today because I feel the art of constructing heavy lifters, also known as heavy launch vehicles, as you'll sometimes hear me referring to them, has become somewhat lost in the current days of KSP. The convenience of new, larger parts has made it easier for players to brute force their way to orbit, while career and science modes have led to players spending less time playing around with the kind of ultra-ambitious missions that require gargantuan lift vehicles in the first place. The result has been a decline in the knowledge and practice of building truly efficient lifters with large lifting capacities. I'm here to change all that, though. Over this series of letters, I'll be teaching all about heavy launch vehicles and how to build them efficiently, smartly, and most importantly, reliably. Starting with tonight's lesson on shape. Yes, you heard me right, shape. Shape is, along with staging, one of the more interesting and oft overlooked aspects of designing heavy launch vehicles, which can differ significantly from its lighter brethren. You've probably heard it said before that the ideal rocket should look like a needle, long and thin, or maybe like a bullet, slightly wider at the base but still highly elongated. These analogies work for medium and light lifters, however they create entirely the wrong image for heavy lifters. The ideal shape to think of with a heavy lifter is more similar to a pyramid, progressively wider as it goes down and quite wide at the base. This differs significantly from smaller rockets, and there are three reasons for this. First, a heavy lifter should be taller than a smaller rocket. Some of the extra fuel to lift a heavier payload will have to be added by simply stacking more fuel tanks, but you can only lift a stack so high with the limited amount of thrust you can cram into a narrow base. Thus, a relatively wider base will be necessary simply to provide enough thrust to lift a taller stack of fuel tanks and heavier payload. This incorporates not only using a wider diameter tank size, 3.75 meters if you only play stock, 5 meters or larger for the kind of enormous lifters we're talking about if you play with mods like me, but also using side-mounted boosters attached near the base of the rocket. You should always attach your side-mounted boosters as low as possible on the rocket to keep the center of thrust of your rockets as far below the center mass as possible. More on the reasons for that a little later. And this contributes to the general pyramidal shape of your rocket. The second reason is more fundamental, part and structural limitations. Each stage in a heavy lifter should be aggressively lighter than the one below it. Once again, more on that later. Because with heavy launch vehicles, it becomes more worthwhile to go beyond the standard 2 stages to orbit and make use of 3 and even 4-stage designs. In order to obtain the correct amount of fuel and thrust for each stage, it becomes necessary to move thinner rocket parts as you move up. At the very least, this will involve at least having fewer or no side-mounted fuel tanks in the higher stages than the ones below it. But this will also likely involve moving from a 3.75 to a 2.5 meter stage diameter, or 5 to 3.75 meters with some of the more popular parts packs such as Nova Punch and KW Rocketry. Once again, more on these choices later, especially in regards to how interstage fairings allow you to build stages wider than 3.75 meters with a combination of part clipping, part resizing, and/or procedural tanks mods. The other important limitation here is that you need your base to be wider than higher stages so you can extend struts upwards to help reduce wobble, which will quickly reduce even the mightiest of rockets to a flaming wreck if you're not careful. Lastly, the most important reason for following a sort of triangle shape for your heavy launch vehicles rather than more even cylinder is aerodynamics. I'm sure you all know the nose end of a rocket should be sharp and pointy, but many players forget that the converse also holds true. Flattening and widening the tail end of your rockets helps to keep it moving in a straight line rather than careening into the ground. The end of your rocket below your engines creates a lot of drag, and if it is wide enough, it can help it to fly in a straight line the same way as the feathers on an arrow or dart do, without the need for as many aerodynamic fins, which only add drag and perhaps a small degree of control authority without doing anything else useful. A wider base to your rocket will allow you to do a number of creative things with engine clusters, a topic we'll get to later. That's it for now. I hope this letter wasn't too long for you all, and hopefully this was all material you are already familiar with. We'll get into more exciting topics in the next 2 weeks: engine clusters and staging, particularly the ways in which optimal staging differs for heavier rockets as compared to lighter ones. Until next time, this is North Star, signing off. May you always know where you're going and find a star pointing true north to guide you home.